And we are live. Look at that. Computer's working today.
Ooh,
Always good.
it
And we
must
are
take
here today.
forever, Mike.
I know. Not just one, but two Vermonters are here. And then there's me. And two people been in the Air Force. And then there's me. That's a common
Two
refrain.
bald people, and then there's me. So,
I'm not wearing a hat because I thought I'd join right in with the theme here.
there you go.
So there we go. Dean, welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
Not bad if you don't mind 90-degree weather.
And I have to tell you, I do feel a little cheated. When I was in seventh grade, I had a teacher who was from Vermont, and her parents came to visit. And when they left, she was talking all kinds of crazy Vermonter accent that we could barely understand her. And I was hoping for that this show. And
well, I can give you a bit of it if you like. I've lived here
My
long
Jesus
enough.
there,
I can
Mike.
put it on as much as you need.
I don't know what you're talking about there.
I
Thank
know
you.
it's funny, isn't it? People, they just don't
Oh.
talk right.
We don't got accents up there, but you damn people from Kentucky can't understand a word you're saying.
Well, I'm kind of lucky that I got relatives in Tennessee, so if I go down there, I know you're supposed to talk a bit slower all the time, so people will understand all the words you're saying between the words, you see.
Okay, and before we go way off topic, we should probably have you show your books first, because then God only knows where.
Then
We
the
can
sky's
say
the
we've
limit.
done our
Yeah.
job then.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
I'm gonna, since you focus on independent publishers, I thought I would show you the very first book that I published just to see what it was going to be like to do, and that is this. Right? Can you see it in here? I guess you got to pull it back. And
Okay.
it's, as you can see, rather thin. So
Yeah.
it wasn't much of an investment. And a friend of mine did the layout work. The artist is Maurizio Manzieri, who, just in case you haven't heard of him, is a 3-time Hugo Award nominee.
Wow.
And he got in touch with me because this story, The Man Who Loved Kites, is a novelette of mine, which had been published before in fantasy and science fiction. And then the Italians did a version of it much later, a good 10 years later, and asked him to do a center spread. And I was lucky. He had contacted me because he liked the story and told me so, and hoped I would like his illustration, which was this in black and white. And you can see that it actually starts down there and goes up over here.
Yep.
And it was a beautiful, beautiful illustration. And so when I decided that, yes, I can live through the process of putting things like this together, I contacted him again to see if he would do other covers for me. And we made out a very nice arrangement where I would do editing for him when he needed it. And I've had the lucky opportunity to meet him a couple of times in person when he's come to the States. It's been a great relationship. So this little story, though, is also reprinted in a collection that I've done, but it was my last book to do so far. So this was that was the second book. This was the first book I had published. This one came out, HM Co. did it, and actually it was HM Harcourt by the time I parted ways with them. Sky Carver here. It's a young adult fantasy, and the first of a 3, which I call follow-ons. You'll notice that Sky Carver here, who is the fellow who discovers he has certain magical powers and needs to be trained in them. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? He winds up going downriver to try to find a mage who can teach him. And along the way, he picks up a couple of sidekicks. There's Raven here and Fireboy here. And after this came out, several people asked me if I could do books about them as well. That was meant to be a standalone. So Raven features Raven, who is a young girl and also has magical talent of being able to turn herself into birds. And particularly in her case, the raven is her natural form. And it's a story about her. It's a coming of age story, as all 3 in the series are. Then Fireboy, who was a brilliant operator of steamboats. I got to add a little touch of steampunk into the story by putting it on a river and having the technology get more and more advanced as you went downstream, and where they actually had steamboats. And so he gets involved and gets his own story later on, his own problem to solve. Then I did Finn's Clock. Finn's Clock was slightly political. Finn is an Irish immigrant, and he arrives in Boston at age 3 with his family from Ireland before the famine, but just before. And it's a time when the American Party, also known as the Native American Party, was the people also known as the Know-Nothings, because whenever they did something wrong and they got arrested, they said, "I know nothing." So this book is about a young boy growing up in Boston, working on Boston Harbor back in 1853. And one morning out of the fog, a Chinese junk appears with some very interesting people and some very interesting clocks on board. And the clocks do have a touch of magic about them, which puts it kind of in the gaslight genre with a touch of fantasy. The next one I did, the Error Rune, was aimed at the Ren Fair people. Yeah, a question?
Can you go back? Go back a book.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have a little thing on there that says first place winner.
Yes, I do. And it's not
What's
fake.
that?
I entered it in a contest that Writer's Digest was putting on, an annual one of their best of contests. And it won the first place in young adult category.
And you're just going to gloss over that? You weren't even going to mention it?
Well, you know, nobody else mentions this. I have one of these things that I got the award, you know, like 2 months before COVID hit. So you can imagine how much the press release was picked up.
Right.
So I have had people remark on it before, and it makes me proud enough that I changed the cover to put that symbol on it so I don't have to keep buying stickers. And I have to say I am proud of the story too. It is one of the better of my books. I really enjoyed the character. I wrote it in the first person, and my wife and I had lived in Boston for 2 years. Way back, right after we got married, 71, 72, we moved up into Vermont in 73. And we had the pleasure, when I was doing the research, of going down to Boston on one Valentine's Day weekend and staying in a hotel that would have been underwater at the time of this book, because Boston is the most landfilled American city and maybe the most landfilled city in the world. It's just amazing how much of that city was built up out of marsh and estuary and part of the Charles River. But it was great fun to write that book. It was one of my favorites. The next one, the Error Rune, starts off in a Ren Fair, and something that I like to go to, although I'm not quite as fanatic as some people. And this young fellow discovers that there's a way to get to alternate Earths if you've got the right magic and you've got the right arrowhead here, which has the magic runes on it. It's made with the magic metal, probably from a meteorite. And he winds up going to an alternate Earth that's still in the Anglo-Saxon era. So he's dealing definitely with coming of age. It's his last year in school coming up, in high school coming up. And what's he going to do with his life when he's been dragged to these Ren fairs all the time, and his uncle's teaching him to be a boyer and follow in the family tradition of selling bows. And then suddenly he's got to deal with Grendel and dragons and things of that sort, to which we add a very angry Celtic druidess, not a very nice person at all, who's not happy to see a bunch of Anglo-Saxons traipsing around on her country. The next one is full-on steampunk, although the background of it is, again, as historically accurate as I could make it, as with Finn's Clock and the Arrow Rune. The ship is here, the Isle of Harris, is modeled after an actual American steamboat that was prowling around in carrying passengers from Pennsylvania to Scotland back in the 1870s and 80s. And I picked it up and ran with that, and added a death ray and some people from Bohemia who are extra smart, including, actually, this is the fun part, the daughter of the genius involved behind the X-ray. The American military has hired him secretly to build this death ray, which is supposed to be able to end all wars. And of course, the very first live test of it, he manages to kill the Secretary of War and also a couple of generals and some senators. And so they're being hounded out of the country and by bad publicity too. And they go on board the ship where this young crew member is assigned the duty of being a bodyguard to them by pretending to be one of the passengers. And they're spies aboard. This is a beach read. You're not supposed to expect too much of a lesson from it, except that ending all wars thing. And it's a spy thriller. There's murders that happen, and there's young romance, but it's 1878 romance, which makes this completely readable by anybody young enough parents might not object to people holding hands on a ship.
That's right.
And the final book is this collection of my short works. There are 20 short stories and novelettes in here, most of which have appeared beforehand in fantasy and science fiction and Asimovs and such. And it's the longest book I've got out there, also the largest format. I've discovered that the bigger the book, the more likely it is that adults will purchase it. So I sell mostly at Ren fairs, but the people there like science fiction, and I go to science fiction expos, and the people there like fantasy. So that's where my major outlets are for these things as well. So that's the whole rack of them.
How many of them are traditionally published?
I'm sorry. Oh, only the first two were traditionally published.
Oh, okay.
And then I had a third one that they decided they didn't want. So I got the rights back to the first two and brought them out first, self-publishing, and then got the third one out. Actually, I wrote Finn's Clock and then finished Fireboy when things were working out with everything else. So I decided, yep, I will finish that series. In the traditional world, as you probably know, if you sell the first two books of a series and you've got more lined up, but those first two don't meet the sales expectations of the traditional publisher, you'll never be able to get the third one out there, because no traditional publisher will want to buy an orphan like that.
Right.
Yeah. So that was part of the impetus for becoming a self-publisher. That and the fact I was already in my mid-60s, and it was taking too long to go through the process. It was 2 years from the sale of the book to the publication for Sky Carver and Raven, after my having spent a couple of years each to write them. So
yeah, they haven't figured that out yet, have they? You think they
No.
would be a little more nimble than that?
Well, they've tried to be now. I've heard tales that people who were happily long-term customers of major publishers printing a new thriller in the series every 2 years were told if they couldn't do it every year, then they'd have to find a new publisher. So they are trying to speed it up, but mostly at the expense of the author rather than the publisher.
Right.
Well,
Yeah.
Of course.
So that's the lineup, and I'm working on a sequel right now to the Bell Cannon Affair. I had a number of people say they really liked it, and at the very end of that, a couple of people wind up being dead, and they wanted to know if they were going to come back to life, and I haven't told them yet. I got to get the book written first.
Is it safe to say, Dean, that you're a bit of an amateur historian?
Yes. My wife and I are members of the Town Historical Society, and I've looked into my genealogy a bit. But mostly I like taking the ideas and then go doing the research to find out what it would really be like in that world. I've read a number of books, young adult and also adult, that are written in fantasy affected or science fiction affected futures or pasts. And in both cases, I get fascinated in the world that's created. And if it's historical, I want to know how true it is. And Finn's Clock, I spent 2 years researching that before it was done. I mean, 2 years of research plus another year of writing, just because I wanted to get it right. I owed it to Boston, I figured. And I had a lot of fun doing it. Dartmouth is across the river and down one town, and they've got a great library. And my wife worked for many years as a lab technician there. And so I had access to the library and could get books out even, so it was great.
Long shot here, but did you ever meet, I'm going to forget his name,
You're not even as old as I am. I forget names all the time now.
He lived over by Dartmouth. He went back to England a few years ago. He's an American.
Went back. Bill Bryson.
Bill Bryce. That's it. Thank you
Yeah.
very much.
I never had a chance to meet him. I've read a few of his books and enjoyed them. And he's definitely a easy to read fella. You know, he's got a good grasp of the language and picks good themes, good topics, and catches you, drags you in.
Yeah, one of his books, he mentions that when he was in England, he tried to get a job at a newspaper, and they asked, why should we hire you, an American, to work here? He says, because I'm the only person in this room who can reliably spell Cincinnati. And and they tested him on it, and he was absolutely right, so they hired him. For those days, huh?
Yeah.
So, what drew you to YA?
Young adults, because I'd been reading a bunch of it at the time with our son. And my wife and I read to him. We alternated reading to him when he wanted to go to bed, and the other person would, do the dishes, and tidy up. And then when he got to chapter books, it didn't work, because then you'd be losing, you'd be only reading every other chapter. So we started reading together. And then as a family, we just kept doing it. And he learned to read pretty darn early at about age 5. And when he was about 6 or 7, he started writing his own stuff. And when he was 8, he asked if he could read, if we could share the reading 3 ways. By then, he was also doing cooking 1 night a week. So
Nice.
It just kept going. Actually, we read with each other. We were reading the Harry Potter series together at the time. I thought, it's working. I'd written a couple of novel manuscripts and mainstream, and one of them based on my first short story, professional short story, The $1 Million Wound, and having trouble getting them published. And I thought, well, I'm gonna see if I can break in with young adult, because I like it, and there's fewer plot lines and fewer main characters, and they're shorter, and that worked out well.
What are some of the kind of tropes you feel you have to follow with YA to make it work?
Well, you do have to watch your language some. And that's one reason why the character of Raven is so well liked, that somebody wanted to read, somebody who was rather foul-mouthed, actually. I won't reveal the name now, wanted to hear more about her. I use a lot of Shakespearean words, grout-knoll and things like that. And I use the word blast because blast goes well in a place where a mage might be able to blast you. And but I came up with a whole lexicon of words for Raven that no censor would probably say, we have to ban this book because she's so foul-mouthed. None of the words are foul-mouthed words in the English language, so that works. That's something to watch out for. And simply because if you're going to write a good book and you want people to read it, you want to make sure that somebody who's uptight or thinks that magic is an abomination and sacrilegious, that they don't force their way into the head of the local school board and and be married to a lawyer and threaten to sue if they don't take your book off the shelf. So,
though, I think in today's age, I would love to have a book banned, because I don't think there's any better marketing in the world than to have, my book has been banned, and you will sell a ton.
Well, I mentioned that to people. I have a pin that I wear on one of my jackets that says I read banned books. Mm-hmm. And when people notice it, I say, I also write books that some people would like banned. And they, ooh, really? Tell me about it. So that's always a good conversation opener. And you're right. It's like if somebody said, we don't want to have a book like Finn's Clock around because the main character is an immigrant. And, I would say, go ahead and ban it. I dare you. He's an Irish immigrant, you bloody fool. What do you think they're going to do to you? You know, they'll break your kneecaps by next week. Go ahead. No, I don't mind playing stereotypes a little bit here and there. But it's true that having a book banned these days would be actually, in my opinion, a great medal for your chest.
Yeah, good social currency.
Yes.
For half the country.
Yeah. Well, only just barely half the electorate.
Well, it's the half that reads, though, so that's what that's what we care about.
Yes.
So that's all right. Mike, you look like you've been trying to say something here for a few minutes.
Nope.
Really? Okay. All right.
My wife warned me that I tend to take over conversations and I should remember to breathe and think about my answers.
And we don't want people thinking about their answers. That is not on brand for this show at all.
I've come to the right place.
And if you keep talking, that means we have to do less work. So we also like that too.
I should make you earn your baldness.
Hey, I do have a question for you.
Yes.
Because you mentioned Harry Potter.
Yeah.
And you've obviously read it all.
Yeah.
Who was the hero of that story?
Of the whole story?
Yeah. Who's the real hero of Harry Potter?
I personally believe the real hero of Harry Potter is Harry Potter. And I admit that Dumbledore was an amazing character, and he was machinating so many things behind the scenes that it was magnificent to see. But, you know, that was a book with real strong sidekicks also. And who, you know, one of whom at least was more powerful magician than Harry was. But he held it together. He was the core that it was about, and what was going to happen to Harry next. And the writer made him the focal character for all but a few scenes in the whole series. It's mostly from Harry's point of view. So I believe he really was the protagonist, the main character. There just happened to be others who were, you know, like Voldemort, for example. Couldn't have the story without Voldemort either, you know. But Dumbledore was the same way, magnificent character. But the story was about Harry. I hope I'm not sounding too traditional to you.
No, you're the only person that's picked Harry, actually.
Oh, really?
We've asked this question to probably 24 people, and you're the first person to pick Harry. Mike, who is Sally?
I don't know. Did you give the wrong link out to people? Because we have Sally is waiting to join us on stage, and we don't know who Sally is.
That would be my wife. Yes.
Oh, okay. Oh, you can bring her on if you'd like.
Would you like Sally?
Yeah, please let her on.
This is different.
Okay, Sally is in the stream with audio only. Hello, Sally. How are you?
I'm good.
So, are you coming on to talk to Dean already about what he said, or is he doing okay?
Do you have something for him to do?
No, I just want to check in on him, make sure he's doing okay.
So far, so good. I've been taking breaths.
He's behaving very well, Mrs. Whitlock. He's doing good.
Oh yeah, I can hear him from upstairs, but I'm doing some stuff in the kitchen, so I thought I'd turn it on. I wanted to see you guys too.
Oh, well, you're the first.
So
we're going to actually remove you from the stage because you got some noise going on in the background there.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah, I have to tell you that my office is in essentially a little alcove that's right off our stairway. So there's a big opening in front of me to make the room feel bigger, to improve circulation and stuff like that. But it means that the sound goes downstairs and you can hear it and people come up here. Also, when I'm writing, I read it back to myself aloud. I want to know what it sounds like, particularly the dialogue, but I'll do the whole book to myself. And I've had a lot of acting and some radio experience. So, you know, I like to do voices as well, as you may have noticed. But it means that she's had to listen to a whole lot. On the other hand, she's also my best first reader. And it's been really, it's really good having a wife who loves to read and is herself also a good writer. She's very good at reading the first round and telling me what's wrong with it, and also how many spelling errors I've made and such.
Yeah, there's no pulling punches there either, is there?
No, no.
Yeah. After you've been married a certain amount of time, it's the gloves are off and
Yeah. We're going on the 54th anniversary in a month. Oh, it's this
how
month.
many? How many?
54th.
Mike's going to have his 54th birthday here soon.
No, I'm going to have my 55th. I am 54.
Whatever. Okay.
Just think, you could have been my son.
Mike, you're the baby in the group tonight.
I know. So I have to ask my question now that
Yes.
I'm usually unhappy with people's reply. There's one correct answer, and most people get it wrong, and they go to Rose's side. So here's hoping.
Okay.
So I want you to visualize yourself. You're going down the main drag of your city. You are in a saddle. And this saddle can either be on top of a T-Rex or a Griffin. Which one do you choose and why?
Well, I would take the Griffin, and I'm probably, always in, because the T-Rex has arms that are so short
Yeah.
that I would look ridiculous riding its back. And I just a couple of weeks, well, it was a couple of months ago now, at the Vermont Science Fiction, Fantasy, and Horror for the first time Expo, there was someone from the group that was reenactors for Jurassic Park who had a blow-up dinosaur that was sort of like a T-Rex, and your feet fit through the middle of it, so you could walk around and it looked like you were riding on it. And he looked so ridiculous. Besides, Griffins can fly and T-Rex can't.
So I always tell people I want the T-Rex because I want the annoying drivers, my T-Rex to pick up the car with his mouth and throw him into a building, and then I get rid of all the annoying drivers. I've been told I have anger issues. And
you got to understand, though, that Godzilla was bigger than a T-Rex. They only stood, they were 42 feet long from tip of the nose to the tip of the tail, but they ran flat.
Yeah. But I'm here in Virginia. There's a lot of bad drivers in Virginia.
Consider where he is. The traffic isn't an issue.
I was going to say, we seldom have much in the way of busy traffic, busy roads.
Okay, well then I guess you are forgiven. Even if EL likes his violence too, and he agrees with me for T-Rex. So
it's good that you have a friend. That's awesome. All right. So the Ren fairs, do you go in costume?
Yes. Yep. For one thing, the Ren fair folk around here won't let you in as a vendor unless you're dressed in proper period garb.
Really?
Which in the case of all of them is anywhere from just after the Roman era to Pirateville. And you'll see a lot of people dressed as pirates in the Ren fairs these days. Not so many Anglo-Saxons anymore. But because of the research I'd done on the Anglo-Saxon era, that's the kind of garb I have. I have a tunic and trousers or trews that are linen, and a little hat that's also linen that Sally made for me. There's so few evidence of what the Anglo-Saxons wore on their heads that you can get away with just about anything or nothing at all. But if you've ever been burned on the pate, as I was once, you've learned, wear a hat, for God's sake. So
you have to spend the whole weekend out there selling books, but dressed up.
But it's a very comfortable garb. Linen is cool in the summer, and I've got a woolen plaid, as they called it then, just a plaid. It's essentially a small wool blanket that I can pull over myself and pin at the shoulder when it gets colder. And if it gets really cold, I cheat and wear long johns underneath.
So if someone would, if I was going to go up there and do that, and I don't have any of that stuff.
If you were going to come up and just go to the Ren fair,
no, if I was going to,
doesn't matter. But if you wanted to take part and sell your books, there are places where you can buy inexpensive reenactor clothing, and you can find it online. And so you can get away without spending too much. And if you have a wife that sews and falls in love with a certain linen fabric, then you can get a really nice looking tunic for very little at all, just the cost of the fabric. He said, speaking from experience. And another wonderful thing that Sally has done for the family is keep us clothed well. So some people get really carried away. You'll see people in entire suits of armor. You'll see more people than should carrying huge swords slung over their backs, and for which there's very little historical precedence.
You mean the obscenely long ones that they can't actually, the blade is longer than their arm, so they can't
Yes,
actually
so that they
get
can't
it
draw
out?
them. Yes.
Yeah.
Somehow it came in fashion that you could carry those things over your back, and admittedly, it's more comfortable to carry them over your back. But the only ones that work are the ones that Legolas had. They're a short sword. It was sort of like a short samurai sword with a longish
Right.
handle. So when he pulled them out, he actually could do that.
Right.
And but when you see the big, huge ones they sell at the,
I blame
let's say the
anime.
male ego has been sparked. And
It's all anime. They have these, physics repelling swords
right.
that are, 1.5 feet wide
Uh-huh.
and 8 feet long, kind of thing. It's so
You
yeah.
can't even carry them. You
Like,
can't
you'd
even
certainly
carry them.
be able to pick
You
one
have
up.
to wear them on
swing
your
it.
back.
Right.
No, the only weapon I carry is a large knife that is very useful for cutting things. And I actually keep a little pen knife. I wear a leather pouch that's actually serves as a sporran as well. And I keep a little, fold up pen knife in there for most of the work. But I keep it here because it's an Anglo-Saxon type of sax. You wear it hanging from the belt with the edge upwards. And we know that from Sutton Hoo. And when it comes out, it looks like this.
Yep.
And the shape of the blade makes it a good entry against chain mail. You can get poked in there and then keep forcing, and it'll split the mail. In the old days, at least, they started making mail better, and then this type of knife kind of fell out of favor. So this is one I made myself, but I have to admit that the instructor of the workshop did most of the fine work. I got to beat on really hot iron and use files, but he had this really fancy grinder that was a belt, and it had ceramic belts on it, and it went real fast. And he said, I can't let any of you use this because the liability insurance would be far too much. So instead, I made this. That's another thing I like to do with the research. The boy in the Arrow is a bowyer, so I learned how to make a bow, and I actually have it and can use it. I cut the tree down myself. It's sort of bragging rights in a way, but I also really want to see how you do that kind of thing if I'm going to write about it.
Yeah.
And I don't want to just read somebody's how-to book and crib from it.
It helps to live up by the Northeast Kingdom as well when you do that kind of thing, because if I was to go around where I live just chopping down trees willy-nilly, I'm sure people would have an issue with it.
That's true. You'll be happy to know, though, you can make a perfectly good bow from something no bigger around than this. So if you did it at night with a handsaw, who'd know?
The HOA would find out. They always do.
I didn't have to, though. We have an 1.5 acres, and that was plenty of room for a small ash tree, and room for me to drop it without hurting anything.
Awesome. Is that why it takes you like 2 years to write a book, though? Is because what happens when you're going to write a book and you have to like build a boat or something? You've done that, though, haven't you?
I have built a boat, yes. I've built 2 canoes and 1 pram, a 13-foot pram that I'm still in the midst of building a sailing rig for. Those came before the writing, actually. I was really intrigued by boats. That's why Boatman is my email address, and my press is Boatman Press. I got really into sailing boats because we were living on the beach at the time that I started reading Horatio Hornblower books.
Oh, those
and
are
so
awesome.
I started reading everything I could of that era, and also learned how to sail on a little Sunfish. nearly killed myself by going out in a nor'easter and then coming ashore again. When there's a nor'easter blowing, you come ashore very hard. But I decided, even though I'm not all that great with my hands, I have the scars to prove it. That was a little accident I brought on by myself by working too late at night in too small a space, in too big a hurry.
What did you do?
Learn a lesson. But I also got into the idea of...
You can't do that and not tell us how you did it.
Oh, well. Do you know what a jointer is?
Yep.
Okay. For those who think it's a machine for making cannabis cigarettes, a jointer is actually a machine for planing down just the edges of boards so that you can join them together very smoothly and glue the surface and get a good bond. And I was using one of those, not only to create that surface, but to square up things. And I was using rock maple, white maple, also sugar maple. It's a very, very hard wood. And so I had to push real hard, and I was in a hurry and hadn't picked up the hold downs and that keep your fingers away from the blades. Now, it's got a cylinder in it in which 3 long blades. In fact, on big machines, blades shaped about like this, only cut off here. They fit in there, and the motor's going at 2,700 RPM, and it's got 3 blades in it. And each time that blade goes underneath the slot, the wood sliding over, it takes a little nick out of it. So you get these little fine shavings, and it also makes a real mess of fingers because it's going so fast. Right. So that's how I did it. And I got to tell you, it was the surprise of my life. I actually have a 20-minute stand-up comedy routine about that evening and some of the interesting things that happened, many of which are actually quite funny, but you're not going to get all 20 minutes of it. Just say that give me all sorts of strange things I could do that, made people who were 13 think it was really cool to have short fingers.
Dean, my dad has this, right? So he's missing this finger.
Uh-huh.
For as long as I can remember, he's had a little red box, right? And he put some cotton in it, and there's a hole in the bottom. And what he'll do, he still does this to this day. He's 92 years old. He still does this. He will put one of his good fingers under the hole in the box and hold it with his left hand.
Uh-huh.
And he'll say, I kept my finger. I put it in formaldehyde. Would you like to see it? And he'll have them lift the cover off the box, and then he'll tell them they can touch the finger, and they will, and he'll move his finger. and the reaction is always the same.
Tell him I love him. He's a man after my own heart.
you should give that a try. It is worth the price of the box of the cotton swabs.
Oh wow, I can believe
hilarious.
It. Yes,
all of us kids are just like, oh my God, Dad, not again.
Right,
not
of course.
And,
but as I always say, if you can't laugh about it, you shouldn't take the time to cut them off in the first place.
Now, what was your reaction the second it happened?
It was, well, number one, I levitated. I truly levitated about 10 feet away. And I said, oh shit, you've really done it. Because my grandfather was missing this finger. And he had lost it on a table saw back when he was in his 20s. And I was in my 20s. And it seems to run in the family. These things fall off. But that was the first thought. And my very next thought was, okay, you got to call for help. And I was in my shop and I turned and I said, wait a minute, turn the machine off first, you idiot. And I thought, why? It's not going to walk after me and try to get me again. But I went over and turned off the machine. And then I ran out to where our phone was. And this was long enough ago that we had a kind of phone that you picked up. And isn't this amazing? Instead of having a rotary dial down on a little box here, the rotary dial was right here. Yeah. So you could pick up your phone and you could dial it, only I had 2 fingertips hanging on by little flaps. because my finger didn't go down into the slot, it fell across the slot. So the under part of each finger was julienne of finger, but the top part was still holding on to the fingertip with a little semicircle gone. And, you know, I just couldn't use that hand. So I thought, well, I could, you know, use my nose maybe, or, you know, but no, I clenched it between my legs and I dialed O, because this was before 911 had come to Vermont. And I did not want to dial 1-603-643, whatever the next 4 digits were. And then I waited 14 rings before the operator answered. So it was an evening like that.
She said, "Hello, Dean. What do you want?"
Yeah, well, it was something like that. And I, trying to be real calm, I said, "Hello, I've just cut 2 of my fingers off. Could you get me the FAST squad," which was first aid stabilization treatment. And our town actually had the first FAST squad in the state. So, and I knew people on it. So I said, "I need the FAST squad and probably an ambulance right now too." And the operator said, "Really? Why? I've cut off my fingers." And it's like, "Oh, yes, sir, right away, sir." So they showed up. They came running in. I got to tell them some bad jokes. They wrapped it up. They took me off. I got more bad jokes. I was told to give a urine sample. And I actually told the nurse in the ER why. I didn't bite them off, you know. And she said, "It's part of the protocol." And then I had to figure out a way to give a urine sample with a hand I couldn't use, you know. So, and the person who led me to the bathroom was about 17. She was a little pinstriper. She wanted to be a nurse when she grew up. And there was no way, you know, that she was going to stand there and help me. So the night went on. Oh, and the other thing is they were short of beds, and I wound up in the neuro ward. So I was in a bed with my hand up like this, held up by, you know, one of the stands that they have, and completely covered. And in fact, the first thing about the completely covered was when my wife came in, I said, "See if you can get a Sharpie. I need a face here." Everybody was coming in and going, oh my God. So I had her put a little face on it, and I said, "Hi, how are you today, Eddie?" You know, so, and they looked at me and realized why I was in the neuro ward. So it went on.
Belong here. Excellent.
Yeah, like I say, if you can't laugh about it, don't bother to cut them off in the first place.
So does that affect your typing? Or have we learned to type with short?
Interestingly enough, I figured out pretty quickly. I was working for a newspaper at the time, and my job depended on being able to type. And in fact, the publisher had told me that when he came in once, and I was writing something out on a pad. And, you know, he said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Well, I thought I'd do a rough draft first." And he said, "You see that typewriter? That's a Selectric. You will type on that or you will not work here." You know, so anyway, I very quickly realized that I could fill in for this finger with this one and this finger with this one. And a few years later, when I was actually working in a totally different job in a high school, I went up to the place to talk to the person who was teaching mostly young women, but coming on to be more young men now because of computers. We're new in the game. I asked her, the woman who taught kids how to type and how to do stenography and stuff, I said, "What would you recommend for this? I can use it, but is there a better way?" And she pulled out a notepad, I mean, a big binder that had every possible combination of fingers that a person could have outlined and which keys you would push with which fingers. There was none of this two stuff, because sometimes it might be only this finger and this finger if it was bad frostbite, you know? So but every one of them there, and we looked, and for my case, I had picked the right thing. I was doing just what the book said I should do. So, you know, I had typed 70 words a minute or so, and now I was typing 60 plus words a minute. It was not a big change.
Nice. And it probably got you out of the draft.
No, it was way past the draft.
Okay. All right.
At 18, what got me out of the draft was a draft number of 229. There was no way I was going to ever make it. So I was in college the year that the lottery system was introduced, And you can imagine how many people were sitting around in front of the TV biting their nails. And I was not doing that. I was actually out with Sally and hanging out with other friends. And then we came in to see, have they got up to me yet? Have they got to the W's? Nope. Eventually they did. I had a friend who wrecked his shoulder throwing a ball back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And I know somebody who had only slightly smaller than me that got a draft notice and found a psychiatrist who, for a small fee, would say that he was not mentally capable of being a soldier. And then there was the guy who married a Canadian student at the same school, and the two of them left for Canada that night, and so on.
You went to college in Vermont then?
No, I went to Lake Forest in Illinois, an hour north of Chicago. Do you guys do that on purpose?
What, drink at the same time?
Yeah.
It was total coincidence.
You're actually identical twins, right? Separated at birth.
An old married couple. Yeah.
So, Dean, I have a question for you.
About time. 45 minutes in.
How many people do you know named Rosaire up there in Vermont?
Oh, boy. You know, I don't know anyone named Rosaire, but it's a good French Canadian name, and that's why there's a lot of people named names like that down here. Why do you ask?
He's on the east coast of Vermont. Rosaire is a northwestern Vermont name.
Okay.
Well, there do tend to be a lot of people with French Canadian names all over the state, but it's true,
Yeah.
northwestern. The first Catholics to come to the Vermont purposefully moved up to the northern townships so that they could, if not go across the border easily, they could get a traveling priest from Canada to come down and lead sermons for them, baptize their children, marry them, that sort of thing.
Well,
But we're talking about the 1700s here. So actually 1700s into the 19th century, a ways before they actually started having priests. And that happened because the Irish came.
How about that?
Yes, I do like history.
A bit, yeah. So
Mike,
do you have
Right.
something that you would call your hometown, or have you just lived too many places for that?
My hometown is here in Thetford, Vermont. Yeah, I've lived here since '73, a lot longer than I ever lived anywhere else. My first memories are of Keesler Air Force Base, Biloxi, Mississippi. And I was about 4 years old. I started kindergarten there, and my dad got sent to Korea, so the family moved back to California. I was actually born in Glendale, California, but I was only 9 months old when the family moved back east, because my father had grown up in Miami, and my mother had grown up until she was 13 in upstate New York. And then in the Depression, her father, who was a very well-to-do architect, went to Florida because there were still people rich enough to use architects down there. And so I have a lot of relatives in Florida, and no connection at all to California, really. So, and every other place, like I said, no longer than 3 years, you know, from like June to June.
Yeah.
And so this is it. I've been here for 50 plus years. See no reason to leave.
No, not now.
Yeah.
All right, Dean, pick a character from one of your books, and we're gonna run them through a little experiment.
Okay, a character from one of my books. Well, probably the easiest one to pick would be Finn, since we've talked about him the most, and he won an award. So Finn O'Neill.
Okay, and what is Finn's? Give us a little background about him again.
Okay, Finn is 14 years old, which means he's now old enough to leave school and go to work full time. He's working with his father, who's a rather rough, blustery guy. The father is a boatman on Boston Harbor. Now, he had been a boatman in Dublin Harbor before they came. His mother worked for her father, who was a tailor, so she's an excellent seamstress. He's got older sisters. The older brother died a few years before. of one of the plagues that went through Boston. His father's got a bad cough going through, and they're working for a clockmaker. They row out in a boat to meet incoming ships before anybody else gets to them, to see if they would like to buy a chronometer or would needs to have their chronometer taken care of, serviced, checked for proper time and stuff, because the chronometer was just coming into major prominence as the way to navigate without getting lost. And as I said, he is with his father, learning the trade. He's happy to be out of school, even though he's not a dumb guy, but he's already looking ahead to the possibility of going to California, where there has been a gold rush not that far back, and to get out from under his father's thumb in a way, when this Chinese junk sails into the harbor. And on board is a Boston merchant who's been missing for years, and his half-Chinese daughter, and a whole entire crew of Chinese people, including the ama of the young woman, who is 15 years old. So that's the setup for the book. Now, Finn is a sharp guy, and he knows a lot, but he doesn't know much about China at all, except that there are a whole lot of Chinese stuff comes into Boston from the China trade and has made some people very rich.
And there's no magic here?
There is magic in the story, and the magic has to do with the clocks, and it's tied up with not only clockwork. The Chinese were building clocks powered by dripping water as far back as like 600 AD. They just lost the knack because a new regime came in, a new dynasty, and they tore down the big clocks and got rid of them. And then the engineer who had built them and written all of his notes in his code that no one else knew died. And so clockworks disappeared from China until the Europeans brought it again in the early 1800s, or actually late 1700s. You ever hear the fable about the emperor and the nightingale?
No.
Loving the sound of it. Well, it was immortalized by not the Brothers Grimm, but the Danish guy, Hans Christian Andersen. And it was one of his stories, very famous. And it's about a clockwork nightingale that is so charming that the emperor declares that, you know, there's not going to be any real birds in the castle anymore in their little cages to sing. And that so ruins the poor heart of the poor princess who owned the real nightingale, that she starts to die. It's a very moving little typical story of that sort, but it's based on an actual incident. Makers in France and eventually Portuguese makers on Macau were building things like little wind-up birds that would actually chirp and would come out of little boxes and cheep at you and then go back in, making things like that. And the Chinese loved them. It was very difficult to survive in the China trade because they said, well, we have everything we need already. We're the center of the universe. Show us something else you can sell us. And they didn't want the stuff that most of the traders wanted to give them. They wound up, the most important part of the trade was sea otters from the northwest coast of America, brought over by New England sailors, and clockworks, which the Portuguese introduced. Those were the biggest sellers.
So, Dean, did you ever play Dungeons and Dragons?
Only a couple of times.
Okay, so we are going to send Finn into the Bald Dome. And I'm going to roll a bunch of dice. And
He's really bad at it, too.
I will read out where Finn gets transported to. It's going to, all the rules of his world still hold sway, but it'll be in a whole new setting that's not in your book.
Okay.
That way we can find out about Finn without you giving us spoilers.
Okay.
And then I will roll and he will get a potion. What is your favorite color?
My favorite color? Oh, sort of a forest green.
So he will get a Erlenmeyer flask full of a forest green colored potion that's all fizzy.
Mm-hmm.
Magical. It is 100% effective, but you have no idea what it does. And and then I will roll, and he will get to pick whether he wants a regular item or if he wants a weapon. If he chooses a regular item, he will face a regular animal. If he chooses a weapon, he will encounter a fantasy creature. We used to have it like, gladiatorial fight to the death, but, maybe Finn's not a fighter. So we're just going to say you encounter each other, and then we're going to go take it from there. Tell us how the story ends.
Tell us how the story ends.
So are you ready?
Yep.
Okay. So Finn has been transported to 14, which is an underwater city. Coral shaped like towering spires of dome palaces lay under the ocean's azure glow. This is by ChatGPT, by the way. This is not my writing. Skulls of
Way
vibrant
too many adjectives.
dart through arched windows, and bioluminescent jellyfish float serenely through the aquatic boulevards. Pearlescent chests rest at the base. Where'd you go? At the base of the coral tower, shimmering with moonstones and enchanted pearls. Let's see, guarded by shimmering hippocampi, otherwise known as seahorses, that glide silently through the depths. So that is where he is.
Now, is he looking out through glass, or is he able to breathe underwater?
He breathes underwater.
Okay.
So for this time, for this thing, he can breathe underwater. Until this episode is over. So now it comes time for you. He has his forest green potion that he knows is magical. Has no idea what it does. Does he want a common item or does he want a weapon?
Knowing Finn, I would say he would think long and hard about that, but he hasn't been threatened yet. So he would probably want a common item.
Okay, so Finn now has his magic potion in one hand, and he's trying to hold 3 tallow candles in the other.
Underwater.
Yeah. What could possibly go wrong?
What can possibly go wrong?
And underwater, there is a stealthy jaguar who can also breathe water.
Aha.
In this city of corals with bioluminescent jellyfish and gargantuan seahorse guards.
Okay.
You picked a Jaguar on purpose just to piss me off, don't you?
I did not.
Yeah, it's a Jaguar. It's a British car. It's very well made. And okay, well, Finn would realize that the tallow candles didn't do him much good, but he'd shove them into his back pocket because he's not the kind of person to, he could make money on those if he got them back where he came from.
Yeah.
He doesn't know if he hasn't been threatened yet, he might try to go and also put some of those diamonds and pearls in his pocket because he knows that it costs a lot of money to make his way all the way to California. And he'd be thinking that he doesn't know sure how he got here, but he knows for sure that there must be a way out. And if there's not a way out, then there's a way to fit in because that's what the Irish had to do. So he would probably see if he could spot somewhere a merman or mer lady who he might be able to talk to. Although not knowing how sound transferred, he'd probably try a bit of that anyway. And if the jaguar came and started moving in on him, looking hungry, he would probably then look around and not seeing any way of escape, drink the potion.
Nice. So he drinks the potion.
You're going to check for mermen first?
Okay, fine. What do I need to roll, Ro?
I don't know.
Thank you, my inexperience. I'm glad that you've been a dungeon master before.
What did you roll?
Give me a number to roll under.
Just tell me what you roll.
11.
Yeah, probably not.
Okay. So there are no merfolk around.
No merfolk around, and the jaguar's moving in, then he would definitely, as long as he knows it's a magic potion, he would do it. The jaguar didn't eat tallow, so he wouldn't wait long enough for that to happen.
Okay, so he drinks a potion?
Yes.
It is the Mistweaver Essence. It allows the drinker to transform into mist for 5 minutes. So now he turns into mist while he's underwater. I don't know how the physics of this work. We're just going to go with it.
Well, he would have the characteristics then of some kind of water sprite, And
Yeah.
only he's not good looking enough to be a male water sprite, and he's not female enough to be a female water sprite. And just because other people who like to read might be looking, I will have to tell you that in Fireboy, this young woman is half human and half water sprite. And
Okay.
so she is translucent underwater, virtually impossible to spot, and knows how to work the currents of the river. So Finn, of course, realizing that he is now transparent, would try to find a current that would sweep him away. He is very well aware of currents because as a boatman, he has to deal with them every day. And the currents in Boston Harbor back in that time, even more than this time, are quite tricky. You have to know them like the back of your hand.
Okay, so Ro, what do I need to roll for him to escape on the currents?
Like a 6.
13.
And even Finn would know that was not a good number.
So
No, but it's enough. It's enough for you to catch a current and rise.
So Finn makes it out with emeralds and gems and unseen by the jaguar.
And not only that, he's got a couple of tallow candles they might be able to make use of.
Yes.
Although they are starting to have gaslight in many places in Boston by then, it wouldn't have been in the homes of the Irish immigrants for sure.
And he's got a nice story to tell. So,
Yeah.
Yes.
He doesn't have to pay for whale oil.
No. Although, again, at that time, too, he might been very interested in having whale oil. The whaling was still a big thing in the 1850s, although it was on the wane already.
Oh, I know. I had to read Moby Dick. Trust me.
I didn't have to read it. I chose to.
God, you're one of those people. Ugh.
Well, I actually read it all the way through. I was given a little prize money when I graduated from college for having been a member of Psi Chi, which was an honorary society for people who graduated with high honors. And I was given money that I could spend in the bookstore. And they were thinking I would get texts to take with me in grad school. And instead, I got a great big, coffee table size book about ships of iron and ships of cotton canvas in the age of sail. And I got an album by the Clancy Brothers, Songs of the Sea. And I got a copy of Moby Dick, which, because I'd been a psych major and a bio second major, I actually never took enough English courses to have gotten assigned that duty. And so I was someone who didn't have to read it, but chose to read it. And I thought there was, places where the plot went away for a long while that they should have stayed on it. It could have been shorter, but I thought it was fascinating to read.
well, they had to write it with a pen, so that means they had to edit it with a pen. So,
He knew what he was getting into. It wasn't his first book either.
Yeah.
But he had a real incident to base it on, and he had been a whaler for 1 year. So
Oh, that's a year too much.
yes, yeah. Knowing how they lived, I'm not sure if I would have survived.
All right, Mike, Dean,
Yes.
we've got to say that our next show is the 10th, which is what, Tuesday at 8 p.m. And we got Nico from Nico Book Reviews on with us. So you
Okay.
join us for that.
Great. Sounds
And,
like a good one to make.
Yeah.
And I
And-
want to thank you all for the invite. This was really great fun. I enjoyed the conversation too. I hope you'll get up here again.
Yeah, I'll get up there again. I'll probably be going up a little bit more often. My wife and I might move back up there in a few years. So
Where were you when you were here?
I was born in St. Albans.
Uh-huh. Been there.
Then I joined the Air Force
Uh-huh.
and went away. I did teach at Norwich for 3 years, so we lived in Barry.
Yeah.
But that was like 04 to 07.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
So
I
So
have
we've
I've seen the place, been through the town,
yeah, you're
met
not missing
people
much.
who had been in it.
Which town is that?
Is it where Norwich University is? It's near Barry, but
Northfield.
yes, Northfield. Thank you.
Yeah, tiny little place. One stoplight.
Yes, yes. But it is a stop on I-89 too. And, you know,
Well, yeah, but you've
if
got to
you
drive
turn
like
left, you get there. If you turn right, you go.
you
Williamstown is
drive like 5 miles off I-89
right, right.
to get to it. So
It's Vermont. There's a lot of room in between buildings.
so for anybody who's never been there, it's one of those states where it says exit 15, next exit 20 miles.
Yeah.
So yeah, if you've got to go to the bathroom or get gas, do it.
Yes.
So, thank you, Dean, very much for joining us. Appreciate it. And thank Sally for joining us for a couple minutes. That was
Thank
a
you.
first for us, so it's always good.
Probably once that we got to the fingertail, she said, "I've heard this all before."
Get a little box with a hole in it, or you might need 2 holes in yours.
I know that's a great story. I really admire your dad for that.
Give it a try. See how it goes.
Yes, I will. Great.
All right. Hope to hear about it.
Okay, it is time to wave awkwardly, and we should say like and subscribe if you're still here.